Got an amazing interview coming up tonight. Shannon.
Jason, thank you so much. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington, and we begin with a Fox News alert. Tonight, right here, live in our studio, a Fox News at Night exclusive. A juror from Paul Manafort's trial joins me to take you behind the scenes, what really happened in the jury room. You already know President Trump's former campaign manager was convicted on 8 counts of bank and tax fraud yesterday. Tonight, you'll find out exactly how it all went down. There was a holdout. There was the paper trail and some rare insight into the Mueller team as well. But first, let's get you caught up on tonight's headlines. Here's Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry with the fallout from President Trump's longtime former lawyer, Michael Cohen's plea deal, the Manafort ruling, and the president's reaction to both. Good evening, Ed.
Shannon, you're right. A lot still happening tonight. Democrats are pushing talk of impeachment, but President Trump is fighting back, tweeting that the only thing he did wrong was win an election that Hillary Clinton was supposed to emerge victorious in. And in an exclusive interview with Fox's Ainsley Earhardt, the president is also lashing out at Michael Cohen. The president noting he had already said publicly that he paid Stormy Daniels because he wanted to kill a story that he says was false in the waning days of the campaign. And the president is getting backup from liberal law professor Alan Dershowitz, who told our own Bret Baier that the pundits who are claiming the president is an unindicted co-conspirator are wrong as a matter of basic criminal law. It would not be a crime for the president to contribute money to his own campaign in the form of money to Stormy Daniels or anyone else, even as Democrats step up their attacks on the president for having his personal lawyer Cohen pleading guilty to multiple crimes, while his former campaign chair Paul Manafort has been found guilty of multiple crimes as well.
I don't know if you know, but I tweeted about the payments, but they didn't come out of campaign. In fact, my first question when I heard about it was, did they come out of the campaign? Because that could be a little dicey. And they didn't come out of the campaign, and that's big. But they weren't, it's not even a campaign violation.
Every single remedy, including indictment of the president, should be on the table.
They're not going to get close on an impeachment track. They're not going to find a crime at the moment. Now, who knows? Manafort may flip. Cohen may provide other evidence.
A lot of what ifs. The president seems to be drawing a clear distinction between Cohen and Manafort, tweeting out that anyone looking for a good lawyer should never hire Cohen, while also sending a tweet that seemed to suggest a pardon for Manafort could be in the offing. The president tweeting, quote, "I feel very badly for Paul Manafort and his wonderful family. Justice," he says in quotes, "took a 12-year-old tax case, among other things, applied tremendous pressure on him, and unlike Michael Cohen, he refused to make up stories in order to get a deal. Such respect," the president says, "for a brave man." But when pressed today by reporters after that, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders insisted there's been no talk inside the administration about a pardon for Manafort, at least not yet. Shannon?
All right, Ed Henry, thank you very much. Let's pull back the curtain on that Manafort trial tonight. Our Fox News at Night exclusive inside the jury deliberations. Joining me now live in studio, one of the jurors, Paula Duncan. Paula, welcome.
Hi.
Good to have you with us tonight.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay, how close, I want to know, did this jury come to convicting Paul Manafort on all 18 counts?
By one. There was one holdout.
So you all agreed on the 8 counts. The 10 others, there was one person who kept you from making that next step.
That's correct, yes.
What was their reasoning, if they shared with you?
Reasonable doubt. The person, a female juror, was, we all tried to convince her to look at the paper trail. We laid it out in front of her again and again, and she still said that she had a reasonable doubt. And that's the way the jury worked. We didn't want it to be hung, so we tried for an extended period of time to convince her, but in the end, she held out, and that's why we have 10 counts that did not get a verdict.
Is that where the note came from when you all wrote to the judge and said you had a question? The foreman sent a note and said, "Can you explain for us reasonable doubt or define it?" Was it connected to that?
It was, and most of us did not want that question out there, but one of the jurors did. So we felt a little foolish actually sending it, but that's the way the jury works, and due deliberation and everything else required that we submit that question to the judge for that juror.
Now, Judge Ellis talked about, this is what he said about the situation. He said, I've received criticism and threats. I can imagine they would too, meaning if your names were released. If you told jurors at the advance of this trial that their names would be public, or at the outset of this trial that their names would be public, I might see some requests to be excused. And I think, certainly, I had no idea myself that this case would arouse this kind of public interest. I think I said at the outset, I now understand why, but even still, it's a surprise. He kept your names under seal because he was worried about threats to you as jurors. So why are you speaking out?
I don't feel a threat. I am an American. I'm a citizen. I feel I did my civic duty. I don't think I need to hide behind anything. I'm not afraid at all. And I thought that the public, America, needed to know how close this was and that the evidence was overwhelming. I did not want Paul Manafort to be guilty, but he was, and no one's above the law. So it was our obligation to look through all of the evidence. And there were four paper boxes full of paper to look through.
Was it confusing? Because I know at one point there was also a question from the jury about whether the counts, the various counts, could be connected to the evidence that would be linked to them. Do you feel like there was a good job by the Mueller team in putting together exactly what leading you down the path they wanted you to get to?
We didn't want that question out there either. Most of us, when they gave us the box, it was listed what was in each folder. Each folder had a number. When you looked at your notes and looked at what witnesses were connected to which charge, it was pretty easy to connect the dots. So most of us had no problem with that.
What were the deliberations like? Was it heated? Was it?
It was. Crazily enough, there were even tears. Two of the jurors, one of the females that did finally change her vote to guilty, would come in one day and say guilty, and then the next day say, oh no, I felt pressured, I want to change my vote back. So there was a lot of back and forth with that. But finally, once again, we got out all those documents, put them in front of her, and she changed her vote to guilty again. But the one holdout would not.
Was not moving, even after the instructions from the judge where he sent you back and said, keep talking about it, I want you to give this another try. That wasn't enough to move the one. Okay, so you said you wanted Manafort to be innocent. Why?
Because even his critics said he was a brilliant man at what he did. And why wouldn't Trump want him to help with the campaign?
But you are a President Trump supporter.
I am, very much so.
So what did you think about the charges being brought against Manafort? Did you think, you said going in you wanted to think that he was innocent. Did you think they were legitimate on the front end versus what you ultimately decided on the back end?
Well, the charges were legitimate, but the prosecution tried to make the case about the Russian collusion right from the beginning, and of course the judge shut them down on that. We did waste a bit of time with that shenanigans, but yeah.
Did the president's name come up in jury deliberations? Was this politicized in any way?
It was, just because in the evidence there were references to Trump and to his son-in-law and to the Trump campaign, especially with the Steve Kalk and the pay-to-play issue. So yeah, it did come up.
Did you feel like there were jurors who were either, like yourself, pro-President Trump or anti, and that influenced their reasoning in any way?
No, I don't. I think we all went in there like we were supposed to and assumed that Mr. Manafort was innocent. We did due diligence, we applied the evidence, our notes, the witnesses, and we came up with the guilty verdicts on the 8 counts.
So the 11 of the 12 jurors, including yourself, would have convicted him on all 18?
Yes.
You saw enough?
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk you through a little bit of a lightning round so we can talk about some different members of the trial, key players, and see how they impacted you. First of all, the Mueller team. What did you make of the prosecutors?
Well, at times, I thought the prosecution was a little bored. I mean, I saw them napping during the trial.
Napping during the trial?
Andres and Van Grack especially. Yeah. So it kind of sent a message of, we're bored with this. And I'm thinking, well, if you're bored, then why are we here?
Mm-hmm. But ultimately, they did a good enough job to convince you on several of these.
The paper.
The paper trail.
Yes.
Okay, because there were overwhelming amounts of documents, and I know that the judge at many times was trying to limit pictures and testimony about expensive items and all kinds of things, but certainly he left in the documents that he felt were the relevant ones you all needed.
Correct.
Okay, so let's talk about the Manafort team and the decision for Mr. Manafort himself not to testify. Did that influence you at all?
It did. I understand why they didn't do it. I mean, we're supposed to assume he's innocent, and therefore he does not need to defend himself. And the judge made that very clear, that there is no requirement for him to do so. However, just based on what I saw, what I heard, I think I would have liked to have heard a little more from the defense. They gave a very easygoing atmosphere to the whole thing. They objected to very little and appeared agreeable throughout it all. Their crosses were even very short when they cross-examined the witnesses. So I don't know. I think I expected a little more.
Okay. Now, Rick Gates, of course, was a business associate of Paul Manafort. He was the key to the whole prosecution, and the defense seemed like most of their case was going to be trying to discredit him, undermine him, talking about him stealing from Paul Manafort, affair or affairs they suggested he may have had. How did he strike you as a witness?
Nervous. Some of us had a problem with accepting his testimony because he took the plea. And so we agreed to throw out his testimony and look at the paperwork, which his name was all over.
Did you find him to be credible?
No, I think he would have done anything that he could to preserve himself. That's just obvious in the fact that he flipped on Manafort.
Okay, so a key witness, but he wasn't the thing that turned it for you. What about Cindy Laporta, the tax preparer, the bookkeeper, who also was testifying under immunity? How critical was she to you all?
Some of us thought she was a good witness. Others did not. I believed her. I think she felt very contrite about her involvement in that. I understand why she did it, but that didn't make it right. I think she was key to me because we saw the false documents, but now we know how they got there.
Okay, what about Judge Ellis himself? A lot of folks have thought he was quite a character throughout this process.
He's amazing.
Was he equally tough on both sides? Do you think he was fair?
I think he would have been equally tough on both sides had the defense been up there more. I think he appeared tougher to the prosecution simply because the prosecution was the people up there the most. He said some funny things, like, for instance, when Andres forgot to mention something indirect, and he came back with a comment about, well, confession is good for the soul.
I mean, he does have quips and things that he said along the way that he kept a lot of focus. Now, this is something he said before the trial, before you were involved. He said to the prosecutors, you don't really care about Mr. Manafort's bank fraud. You really care about what information he might give you about Mr. Trump and what might lead to his impeachment or prosecution. What do you make of that characterization?
Exact, spot on.
So you think that this was an unfair prosecution, although you would have convicted him on all 18, or is it how the case came to be for you that's a problem?
It's how it came to be, how it was handled, the attention that it got, and how they tried to relate it to Trump, and that it was the first one in Mueller's lineup to come to trial. And yeah, it might have been a tax audit, but it wasn't. And I think that they used Manafort to try to get the dirt on Trump, or hoping that he would flip on Trump.
Yeah, and that's not what this trial was about. He's now proceeding to another trial in D.C. Were you all aware of that this separate proceeding would happen with him as well on other charges?
I was not at the beginning.
Okay, so how hard was it to stay away from everything you're supposed to stay away from during the trial and not talk to other jurors until you're really in deliberations?
The hard part was not talking about the case to the jurors because we spent a lot of time just waiting in a small room, and so, you know, I tried to lead people like, what's your favorite food? And because we played those games, I can tell you that the youngest, including the alternates, was in her mid-20s. The oldest on our jury was 69, so average age in the mid-50s. One person drove 108 miles round trip every day to do this. That's a lot of driving. I was almost there, but I was the second furthest away. One person only drove 5 miles round trip.
Did you ever have hesitation once you realized what this trial was going to be, that you were being questioned for, about getting involved with it?
Could you say that again?
Did you ever worry, once you realized, like, oh, wow, I'm being called to be a juror on the Paul Manafort trial, did you have any hesitation about being a juror?
Not at all. It's my civic duty, and I'm pleased to serve my country in any way I can.
All right, well, you've definitely shed some light on it for us. Paula Duncan, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, stay tuned. Our panel of experts joins me to break down what we just heard from Paula. But first, new details emerging tonight about the suspect in the murder of Molly Tibbetts. How the man that officials say is an illegal immigrant landed a job in this country and lived in Iowa undetected for more than 4 years.
This raises questions about his immigration, employment, and criminal history, and we must receive answers.
Plus, another Fox News at Night exclusive. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy joins us live. Now, we've got some new Fox News polls. We're going to drill down on the GOP's plan to defy history and try to hold on to the House through November's midterms. He's coming up.
Bart.
This is a Fox News alert. There's a hurricane warning for Hawaii residents on the Big Island and Maui. The Category 4 storm Lane is scheduled to make landfall tomorrow, prompting some emergency shelters to open early and the public school systems to close for the rest of the week. Now, the Navy is moving ships and submarines out of the state. They want to position them to be able to help with response efforts if they're needed. Well, as residents rush to stores to stock up on supplies today, officials warned of damaging winds, prolonged heavy rainfall, and life-threatening flash flooding. New details tonight on the shocking murder case that's fueling even more outrage over our immigration system and sparking a national conversation on just that. Anita Vogel is here to fill us in. Good evening, Anita.
Well, good evening, Shannon. You know, what started out as a story about a missing young woman in Middle America is now front and center in the debate over illegal immigration. The suspect accused of murdering college student Molly Tibbetts, 24-year-old Christian Rivera, made his first court appearance today. Officials say he has confessed to following Tibbetts while she was jogging and then said he blacked out. And the next thing he remembered was finding her bloody body in his trunk. Authorities add he entered the country illegally some 4 to 7 years ago and had been working at Yarraby Farms near where Tibbetts went missing. Originally, the owners said that they had used the E-Verify system, which allows employers to confirm the eligibility status of employees to work in the U.S. But earlier today, one of the farm owners had to walk that back.
What we learned in the last 24 hours is that our employee was not who he said he was. And just within the last 4 hours, we have come to learn that the Social Security Administration Employment Verification Service is not the same as E-Verify.
Law enforcement officials say, in fact, Rivera used fake documentation to obtain work at the farm, and he had zero immigration status in this country. The story now ratcheting up the immigration debate just ahead of the midterm elections, with Democrats charging that by focusing on individual criminal cases, Republicans are distorting the idea that immigrants are more prone to violent crime. President Trump says the point is Rivera never should have been in the country in the first place.
Molly Tibbetts, an incredible young woman, is now permanently separated from her family. A person came in from Mexico illegally and killed her. We need the wall. We need our immigration laws changed.
Now, Rivera is currently being held on a $5 million cash bond. His preliminary hearing on the first-degree murder charge is set for August 31st. And Shannon, there will be cameras in the courtroom, so we'll all be watching that. Back to you.
Anita, thank you very much. Well, Molly Tibbetts' death has reignited a political firestorm over immigration reform in this country, as some say politics should not be a part of this tragedy at all. Tonight's panel, former Ohio Senate Minority Leader Capri Cafaro and senior columnist at townhall.com, Kurt Schlichter. Welcome to you both.
Good evening.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so at the end of Anita's report there, you saw a video that the White House put out with the president talking about Molly Tibbetts' case and saying, we got to get the wall, we got to reform our laws, we got to do all of it. Kirk, how do you respond to those who say this is not the time for politics?
I think this is exactly the time for politics. My heart goes out to the family, as everyone does. We're all united in that. But this is an issue we have to discuss, because too many of our young people, too many of our old people are being murdered, are being injured, are being victims of crime because of illegal aliens. Illegal aliens, in large part, are not committing other crimes besides breaking into the country, but a certain number of them are. And if we don't enforce our laws, we are going to continue to see Kate Steinle's, Jamil Shah's, and Molly Tibbetts. The numbers keep rising, Shannon. We've got to stop it. We have to enforce the laws that our legislators pass, that the American people want.
Yeah, what about that, Capri? Because these are laws, whether you hate them or like them, they were duly passed by Congress. Right. And a lot of people will say they're not being enforced. The system is broken and Congress seems unable to get anything done.
Well, obviously, there are significant issues when it comes to, our immigration laws in the United States. I mean, part of that is because we have gridlock in the United States Congress, and neither Democrats nor Republicans are willing to come together and find something between build a wall and abolish ICE. There is a consensus place in the middle of all of this that we absolutely have to address in order to move the nation forward. We do need to enforce laws, but take this tragic circumstance in Iowa. You have an employer that, at least it sounded like in good faith, tried to verify this individual's immigration status, and the system failed them. So, how are you even supposed to enforce the law on this individual when you couldn't even figure out whether or not he was legally in the country or not?
Because there are reports that the family is saying that own this farm, like, this isn't the guy, he's not who we thought he was. I mean, he's been using a different name. There's at least one report in the Washington Post, Kirk, that he was using a stolen ID. So how do you fix this whole thing?
Well, that happens all the time, Shannon. And if you or I were using a stolen ID, we'd go to jail. If an illegal alien does it, we have an establishment that wants to excuse it. The fact is, he got into this country. He shouldn't have. We should be able to secure our borders. Gosh, that's the most basic. These are the most basic jobs of any government, to secure one country's borders, to protect its people. We are failing that, and that is a choice of a significant number of the members of our establishment. A choice not to enforce these laws because many of them want illegal immigration.
Is that fair, Capri?
I think that is a little bit overstated, and here's why. I think that there's this underlying narrative that Democrats want, to flood the country with illegal immigrants because somehow this is going to become our voting base in 2020, for example. So if we grant amnesty to all these people, we get a new voting base.
Why wouldn't they vote for you, though? Why wouldn't they if you gave them amnesty?
Well, no, but here's why. Because that's making the assumption that, immigrants of any stripes, particularly we're usually in this context talking about individuals from the Hispanic and Latino communities. That's making the assumption that they're just going to blanketly vote on one issue. You have many other nuances, including faith. Many of them are Catholic. So they're not a monolithic voting base. So, and the other thing is this, is that there are a number of us who respect the job that is done by our law enforcement and ICE, that want to see some kind of comprehensive immigration reform that includes strengthening the border. So again, this isn't abolish ICE or build a wall. We need to find a middle ground for all Americans, and also to retain our history as an immigrant nation.
Very quick final word to you, Kirk.
Well, look, my Latin immigrant wife, legal immigrant, whose family came here, joined the Army, built lives here, she's scared. She's scared for our kids because this is out of control. And we need to take control of our borders to protect the American people.
Well, it gets a little harder to do that if you abolish ICE. And as Capri, as you said, there's a split over that. Not everybody on the left wants that to happen, but there is a vocal group that does. All right, Capri and Kirk, come back soon. Good to see you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, coming up, we'll get back to breaking down our exclusive interview with Paula Duncan, a juror from the Paul Manafort trial.
America needed to know how close this was and that the evidence was overwhelming. I did not want Paul Manafort to be guilty, but he was, and no one's above the law.
Plus, new polls show Republicans have got an uphill battle to try to keep control of the House in the midterm elections. Can they do it? How? Well, House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy tells us his plan next. Some brand new Fox News polls show Democrats in a strong position going into the midterm elections in November, as calls for President Trump's impeachment move from fringe to the mainstream with the news of his former longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen's plea deal. House Majority Leader, a presumed contender to be Speaker of the House should Republicans retain control. Congressman Kevin McCarthy joins us live to weigh in on all of it. Mr. Leader, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for having me tonight.
Let me ask you what level of pressure that you feel at this point as a Republican to either embrace or distance yourself from the president.
Not to distance myself from this president at all. This president has done a tremendous job on rebuilding this economy, rebuilding our military, and every step along the way. I know what you've watched and seen out there, and not one of the items that I saw from Manafort or Cohen had anything to do with Russia collusion or anything else in that manner. So this president has worked hard, has stand strong, and that's why I think when this election comes around, you're going to see Republicans maintain the House.
We're going to talk with our legal panel in just a couple of minutes about what the Cohen guilty plea does or doesn't do with regard to the president. But what is your understanding or what is your feeling about the fact that he stood there and said on these two campaign finance accounts that the president directed him to do something specific? People agree and disagree about whether it's a criminal act or not, but Cohen does directly link him to it.
Well, first, let's remember, what did the Justice Department say about Cohen yesterday? He is someone that has a pattern of lies and disbelief for dishonesty for extended period of time. That's what the Justice Department said about Cohen just yesterday. He lies, he's dishonest for an extended period of time. So, in my point of view, the whole investigation was about Russia collusion. This has nothing to do with it. So the president, I see nothing wrong in the extent of where he's going right now.
Okay, I want to read something to you from a Sacramento Bee editorial and give you a chance to respond. They say, the headline is this: silence is complicity on Trump. California Republicans are guilty. They say Republican leaders of the legislative branch are failing to fulfill their constitutional duty to provide checks and balances on Trump. And McCarthy has given little indication that he would change that on his watch as Speaker. McCarthy's not said anything about Cohen. How much is he willing to tie himself to Trump in pursuit of the Speaker's gavel and the power that comes with it? Your response?
I wouldn't expect anything less from the Sacramento Bee. But let's remember what we have done. We have built an economy here that has created 4 million new jobs since the election. We have passed a tax bill that has lowered unemployment to the lowest points we've seen for African Americans, women, in so many different aspects. But think of this, Shannon. In the last 49 years in the history of America, unemployment has only been below 4%, 8 months in those 49 years, but 3 of those 8 months were just this year. We have stopped human trafficking on online system. We've also passed the most comprehensive ability to stop opioid epidemic. This Congress has also invested in the military. We reformed the GI Bill. In the history, you only had 15 years to use it or you lost it. Now it's for a lifetime. I think we have gone a bin and beyond, and we have so much more work to do. We have passed, starting to build the wall, secure our border, but what have the Democrats done? Not one of them voted for that tax bill that created 1.5 million new jobs. Not one Democrat had voted on the 2 times we put before us to have immigration reform and secure the border. But what have the Democrats put across the border? That they want to abolish ICE. They want to impeach the president. That's what they voted on twice. Tom Steyer brags that his list is bigger than the NRA to impeach the president. Then what else do they want to do with our health care system? They want to bankrupt Medicare. Costs more than $32 trillion, but it would end Medicare as we know it. And 55% of Americans have health care based upon their employer. That would be no more. This is the plan the Democrats have, but you also see a much different plan. It's results versus resistance.
Okay, let's talk about this because we have a lot of Fox News polls today. One of the top things that people talked about that they care about in this election is healthcare, but above that was the economy. So there's good news for you guys on the economy because when people were asked who's most responsible for the current economy, far and away, Trump/Republicans took the winning honors here, 44%. Democrats and President Obama are down at 15%. So you had that as a positive, but you also have this poll talking about what's your opinion opinion of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. The Democratic Party has a 50% favorable. The Republican Party's upside down by 17 points, 39% favorable, 56% unfavorable. So they give you credit for the economy, but overall they're not happy with the party. How do you campaign based on those numbers?
Okay, you're looking at a poll of today. If I went back 2 weeks ago and I looked at the generic ballot, that generic ballot 2 weeks ago was the exact same ballot it was the day before the 2016 election, where we won the presidency, we won the Senate, and we also maintained the House. This election is different than any election I've seen before. It is going to weave back and forth week by week. What we have to do is continuing to solve problems, build results, but what you see why the economy, the Republicans are winning it, because not one Democrat voted for the tax bill. What are they proposing? You watched what's happened across this country. When I was in Sacramento last week and they were protesting me over immigration, we were arresting Omar Amin. He was a member of ISIS, and he was in California. He was allowed to come into this country under the Obama administration. And what did he do on his way here? He killed a police officer in Iraq because he's part of al-Qaeda and ISIS. We need to secure our border, and that's what we've been working on.
One thing the parties do agree on is that there are a lot of immigration things that need to be cleaned up, and whether you can find consensus. We're tuned in, so let us know. Mr. Leader, it's great to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Shannon, for being here. And remember, this election is going to be about results or resistance. And I think at the end of the day, the American people will pick the results.
Well, there's a lot of motivation on both sides and a lot of resistance out there, as you know, having encountered it in person last week. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
On Tuesday, a Northern Virginia jury found Paul Manafort guilty on 8 counts of tax and bank fraud. Tonight, one of those jurors spoke exclusively to Fox News at Night. Our legal panel now weighs in on what they heard. Next.
The charges were legitimate, but the prosecution tried to make the case about the Russian collusion right from the beginning, and of course the judge shut them down on that. We did waste a bit of time with that shenanigans. I thought that the public, America, needed to know how close this was and that the evidence was overwhelming. I did not want Paul Manafort to be guilty, but he was, and no one's above the law. So it was our obligation to look through all of the evidence, and there were 4 paper boxes full of paper to look through.
Tonight, you heard exclusively from a Paul Manafort juror about the deliberations that led to a guilty verdict on 8 charges, but left 10 others unsettled. That was Paula Duncan speaking out. Time now for live reaction from our legal experts, former DOJ official Tom Dupree and Ninth Circuit attorney Harmeet Dillon. Great to have both of you tonight. Harmeet, I'll start with you. I mean, she decided to speak out, even though the judge has sealed the names and said the jurors, he wanted them to be safe. She felt she wanted people to know exactly what went on behind closed doors. You don't often get that perspective from a juror.
Well, you always seek it as a trial lawyer, and it's fascinating to hear what the jurors are focused on. It's usually not what the lawyers think. I mean, for example, noticing that people are catnapping, that just kind of reminds all of us lawyers that we have to be on alert and on our best behavior at all times in front of the jury, that they really are paying attention. So I found it fascinating. I thought it was great that she shared with people what the thought process was, and that she's not afraid. That gives me a lot of hope for our democracy.
And it was interesting to me that she said that Rick Gates, this was the guy that was supposed to be the prosecution's star witness, that a lot of them were turned off by him, and they didn't exactly all of them find him credible. But Tom, they said the paper trail was just unmistakable. And Cindy Laporta, the tax preparer or bookkeeper, her testifying along with those documents led them right where the prosecution wanted them to go.
Yes, and Shannon, that was one of the more fascinating aspects of your interview. And frankly, one of the points that really resonated with me is that she was saying how in some cases the jurors almost just tuned out the actual testimony because they had doubts or concerns about the credibility of the witnesses, and instead they based their deliberations in large part on the documents, which is fantastic. I mean, it warms my heart as a litigator because a lot of times you throw thousands of pages of text-heavy documents at a jury and you wonder, is anyone going to actually look through these? But in this case, it really seems that they did.
Yeah, and there were 18 counts there. They found him guilty on 8, but this is how close it came. There was one person who didn't want to say guilty on all 18. Here's what Paula Duncan told us.
We didn't want it to be hung, so we tried for an extended period of time to convince her, but in the end, she held out, and that's why we have 10 counts that did not get a verdict.
Harmeet, anything that you heard tonight that may lead this team to decide they want to prosecute those 10 counts again?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the evidence was pretty, there was a lot of documentary evidence here. And so I think that if I were the prosecution, I'd probably be focusing on that other trial and seeing if they can leverage a settlement, plea from Manafort there rather than beating the dead horse here. I mean, they've already got him on, dozens of years of potential sentencing. I'm not sure that's a great use of taxpayer resources.
Yeah, and Tom, I mean, they went round and round with this one juror, but if that person has the reasonable doubt, then you don't move forward. And the judge sent them back with that special charge, take another look. But ultimately, one person makes all the difference on 10 of those charges.
That is true. I mean, that is our system. Love it or hate it. One juror can make a big difference if he or she is determined to hold out. And the one thing I will say, Shannon, that really impressed me is that it is clear that this jury afforded Paul Manafort the presumption of innocence. We heard how she said she didn't want him to be guilty, and they came into this. I mean, she was a Trump supporter. Right. She came into this saying she didn't want it to be true, but the evidence left them no choice.
Yeah, and she said that she supported the president, and yeah, she felt like much of this, the genesis of this, the Mueller investigation, she has serious qualms and questions about. But when presented with the evidence in this case, she was left with no other option. All right, Tom, Harmeet, please stay right where we are. We're going to come back to discuss if Tuesday's Manafort verdict or the Cohen plea deal put the president in any kind of legal jeopardy, or if that's just a lot of bluster. Right after this.
Well, there's no question that he's committed a federal crime, and whether he can be indicted has never been decided.
That is Lanny Davis. He is the attorney for Michael Cohen, the president's former attorney, talking about, he says there, let's take it to our legal panel, former DOJ official Tom Dupree and trial attorney Harmeet Dillon, that there's, quote, no question the president's committed a federal crime. Let's talk about that first. Tom, to you.
Well, I don't believe what Lanny is saying is exactly accurate here, Shannon, to say the least. I mean, for one thing, all that happened was the president's former lawyer entered a plea bargain in which he made allegations and admissions concerning his conduct. That does not automatically mean that the president is guilty. In fact, if the president someday were called upon to defend himself in a court of law, I think he would have very strong defenses to this very charge. The other point, of course, is that the ultimate audience is the Congress. If we are talking possible impeachment, maybe this has relevance. But as far as whether the president could be charged with a federal crime, Bob Mueller has been absolutely clear that he is going to follow and respect the Department of Justice guideline, which says you cannot and shall not indict a sitting president.
Yeah, I mean, Lanny Davis goes on there to say the second part of that, whether he can be indicted, has never been decided. So we do have these guidance documents from the Justice Department in 1973 and 2000. Harmeet, in your mind, is that settled? Because Rudy Giuliani says that he's gotten assurance from Mueller's team verbally that they acknowledge those DOJ guidelines. You can't indict a sitting president.
Yes, I mean, I think that is pretty settled, frankly. The noise that Lanny Davis, who's a paid hack for the Clintons since the 90s, is spreading around on the media today is communication messaging geared at impeachment and nothing else. I mean, as has been previously said, there is no evidentiary value to Michael Cohen's sudden flip-flop on this issue. Previously, he had said something completely different, and now he's trying to save his hide, and you can't really blame him for that. But, I mean, throwing your client under the bus, breaking the sacred oath and trust of attorney-client privilege, and pointing this finger in this self-serving way is nothing but opportunistic, and I think it's going to be seen as such by the public at large.
Okay, so this now bleeds over into the consideration the Senate has got going on right now of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to be the next Supreme Court justice. A number of them stepping up today saying, listen, with all this Cohen stuff in mind and the fact that Brett Kavanaugh has made statements about whether or not sitting presidents can be indicted or the subject of an investigation, there's just no way that we can confirm him, and we've got to put the brakes on right now. Tom?
It's absurd, Shannon. It is absurd, that argument. It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, look, the fact is there are a lot of people who are very desperate to stop Judge Kavanaugh. I think Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation is inevitable at this point, and this is simply a Hail Mary pass by people trying to postpone or find some way to stop what, again, appears to be a near certainty at this point. There's no connection. There's no reason to delay Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation to the United States Supreme Court.
Harmeet, what do you make about these latest claims and the fact that there are some senators, Democrats, who have stepped up to say that, listen, even if Kavanaugh does get through, he must recuse himself from any case he would hear dealing with this president?
It's complete garbage. It's kind of pathetic, and thanks to social media, we can now quickly in real time compare all the cut and paste talking points of these senators. And, you know, I mean, they would have a lot more credibility if they were selective in their outrage, but they're not. It's just sort of scattershot outrage and autopilot outrage, and it really detracts from their credibility. I'm wistful for the days when you know, people would hold their fire on both sides and, you know, sometimes let the other guy's guy go by when they're acceptable, clearly. I mean, the nominee could have been way worse for Democrats and more extreme than Brett Kavanaugh. So this is just silly. It's just noise.
Well, and it is funny to look back at current members of the court being voted in by, you know, things like 96-0. It seems like those days are behind us, at least for now. All right, Tom and Harmeet, thank you both for joining us. Great to see you tonight.
Thanks, Shannon.
And to our viewers, most watched, most trusted, and most grateful you spent your evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream.